Shabbat Shalom. So special to be together celebrating a simcha. I want to start off today with a little story. I think many of you, those of you who know me, many of you know that before I went to rabbinical school, I was an outdoor educator. And my first summer on staff at Camp Ramah in the Rockies, Camp Ramah is kind of outdoor adventure-themed summer camp, I was working on the farm. They have a really wonderful farm program. There's not only fruit trees and vegetables, but also goats, chickens, bees, and the first year I was there, we even had alpacas. And one of them was actually named Emunah. It was a very pious alpaca. So part of my job was to feed and care for the animals. And I have to admit, I was a little afraid of the alpacas, because apparently if you get too close, they'll sometimes kick you. And this is especially true if you come up behind them. So they say that you have to approach from the side or from the front. The problem was I kept forgetting which side it was that they kick from. So I would try to avoid them from all sides. And when they were in the barn and I needed to come in and feed them, I would kind of edge along the side of the wall, trying not to get too close, not to approach from the wrong direction. But I should probably mention that no staff or campers were actually injured by an alpaca. Then there were the goats, the chickens, the bees, each with their own needs and feeding schedules. I guess we didn't have to feed the bees, they kind of did their own thing. The learning curve was steep, but the feeling of connection with these animals over the course of the summer was really incredible, even with the alpacas. You can probably see where I'm going with this. We just read about Noah's Ark. Noah was responsible for taking care of a menagerie, every animal on earth. According to one midrash, he never slept a wink the entire time he was on the ark, because he was busy all day and all night feeding the animals. In another discussion, the sages argue over whether he had to bring special food for all the animals or whether he could just feed them the same thing. One opinion says they all ate fig cakes, a convenient meal for all. But another insists that Noah brought food for each and every animal according to its own needs. The sparrows ate seeds, the giraffes ate leaves. Zoe and I both wondered how that works with carnivores. Did he need to set up an elaborate ecosystem of predator and prey? I can only imagine it would have gotten very complicated, but apparently Noah knew how to handle even feeding the lions. Which raises a few questions. Where did Noah learn all this? How did he know what every creature needed? And maybe more importantly, why was Noah, of all people, chosen for this role of prophetic zookeeper? A midrash from Bereshit Rabbah tries to answer. The rabbis notice that although the Torah calls Noah a righteous person, don't actually see him doing anything righteous. We're told that he walked with God and that he found favor with God, but not why. So the midrash offers a parable. It's like a person walking on the road who meets another traveler and joins them, and takes a liking to them. To what extent? To the extent that he gave him his daughter in marriage, and to the extent that he was able to know which animal is fed in the second hour of the day and which in the third hour of the night. So at first this parable is a little confusing because it's mixing metaphors, but in this story, God is the lone traveler. In a world that has descended into cruelty and chaos, God is lonely. And along comes Noah, another lonely traveler. He might not be perfect, he might not be heroic, but someone who walks apart from the corruption of his generation. Out of happenstance or maybe a desire for companionship or curiosity, they walk together. They take a liking to each other, they enjoy each other's company. And out of that connection, the parable says, God gives Noah his daughter. The biblical scholar Aviva Zornberg helps to decode this cryptic story, clarifying that in these kinds of parables, God's daughter is a symbol for wisdom. What is this special wisdom that God gives Noah? It's not prophecy, it's not theology, but his painstaking, detailed knowledge of the feeding schedules of every species within the ark. It's not the legendary riddle-solving wisdom of King Solomon. It's the humble and technical wisdom of caretaking. Several commentators connect this to a verse from Proverbs. A righteous person knows the needs of his animal. To be righteous, Zornberg explains, is to care for and provide the needs of all creatures, like God's self. To be able to feed, one must have not simply sterling character, but a kind of curiosity, a kind of wisdom. When Rashi comments on this verse from Proverbs, he takes it a step further. He says that a righteous person knows what his animals and his family need. Zornberg says that Rashi is not embarrassed to include both cattle and human beings under the same rubric of need. There's no shame in the needs of the whole She says there's no shame in the animal needs of the whole human being. There's a humility in that, a recognition that we too, human beings, are creatures with needs. Every morning, our tradition gives us a blessing to remind us of this, and we said it today. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam she'asa li kol tzorki. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of the universe, who has provided me with all my needs. We say these words each morning as part of a series of blessings to thank God for the basics. Our physical abilities, freedom, Jewish identity, the very solidity of the ground below us. Originally, these blessings weren't actually said in the synagogue altogether. According to the Talmud, each one should be said during the process of waking up and getting ready for the day. So as you open your eyes, you bless God for giving sight. As you get dressed, you bless God for clothing the naked. And this blessing, she'asa li kol tzorki, God provides all my needs, is said when we put on our shoes. Why when we put on our shoes? The 17th century Iraqi sage, the Ben Ish Chai, explains why. Before we put on our shoes, he says, we aren't really ready to do what we need to do that day to take care of the needs of ourselves or our household. Once we put on our shoes, he says, it's as if our needs have already been fulfilled because we're now equipped to go out and do what must be done. I love that. It's not a blessing about waiting for God to it's not about passively waiting for God to meet our needs. It's a blessing about agency, about recognizing that we have needs, that others in our lives have needs, and that we have the ability and responsibility to respond. We put on our shoes and get to work. Our society, I think, tends to overemphasize personal agency and neglect to recognize our interdependence with other people and creatures. We know the myth that we should be able to pull ourselves up by the bootstraps. It's a myth used to justify decreasing resources for society's most vulnerable. And physically impossible metaphor, by the way. If you pull on your boots, it won't really help you stand up. But on the other hand, the Ben Ish Chai teaches that putting on our shoes is the first step in caring both for ourselves and also for others. A recognition that each person needs to both give and receive help. My friend and colleague, Rabbi Benny Summers, has another interpretation of this blessing. He says this blessing isn't about the fulfillment of needs at all. It's about the fact of having needs. God made us creatures with needs, and it's our needs and the pursuit of meeting them that bring us closer to one another and to life itself. Our hunger teaches us to appreciate the flavor of food. Our loneliness, as we saw in the parable, teaches us to seek out companionship. Our limitations teach us to ask for help. When the floodwaters rose, Noah wasn't necessarily a saint. But in the ark, in the long, exhausting nights of tending and feeding, he underwent an education in caring for God's creatures. He learned the holiness of the mundane, the sacredness of cleaning up after animals, of knowing when they're hungry, simply showing up for their needs. If The old world was destroyed because it was filled with violence and senseless destruction. The new world would be rebuilt by someone who knew how to care, to tend to the needs of others. We all do things like that. We walk the dog, we cook dinner, we go to work to provide for our families. It can all feel ordinary, but these are holy acts. They're small daily ways that we hold the world together, and they connect us more deeply to those around us. And yet, too often, those who do acts of physical care, those who feed, clean, nurture, and heal, are undervalued and underpaid. Meanwhile, those in power argue about whether people even deserve help with their most basic needs: food, housing, medical care. But Noah's story teaches us that righteousness begins there, in seeing the needs of others and taking responsibility for their care. Noah's wisdom wasn't lofty or abstract, it was lived and embodied, the wisdom of feeding. That was the wisdom of healing and rebuilding after destruction. So I want to bless that we too have the curiosity to learn about the needs of others, the humility to recognize our own needs, and the resolve to put on our shoes, show up for each other, and build a more caring world. Shabbat Shalom.